The enigmatic figure, one Dan Tucker, born in the late 1840s on Canadian soil, would go on to make his mark as a formidable enforcer of the law, a skilled tracker of fugitives, an expert marksman in America's untamed frontier. Despite his northern roots, Tucker's distinctive southern drawl often led many to assume he was a native son of the United States. His prowess with firearms earned him the ominous sobriquet, Dangerous Dan, a moniker that would prove prophetic throughout his career. The mid-1870s saw Tucker's fateful encounter with Harvey Whitehill, the presiding lawman of Grant County, New Mexico. Their paths converged in 1875 when Tucker, fresh from a stint at the Stagecoach Depot near Fort Selden, arrived in Silver City. Although whispers of Tucker's alleged involvement in a fatal knife altercation in Colorado raised eyebrows among some residents, Sheriff Whitehill saw potential in the newcomer and brought him on as a deputy. Initially introducing himself as David, Tucker soon expressed a preference for the name Dan and quickly gained the sheriff's confidence. Tucker's reputation for swift and lethal action was cemented early in his tenure. In 1876, a violent confrontation unfolded at Johnny Ward's dance hall when a heated dispute between two Mexican patrons escalated to a stabbing. As the assailant fled the scene, Tucker gave pursuit. In a full view of several bystanders, including the sheriff's young son, Wayne Whitehill, and 12-year-old Dan Rose, Tucker discharged his weapon, striking the fleeing man directly in the neck. The following year brought another deadly episode, once again witnessed by young Wayne Whitehill. Responding to reports of an inebriated Mexican man pelting rocks at passerby on a side street in Silver City, Tucker drew the attention of a group of curious local youths who trailed him at a distance. Upon locating the disorderly individual, Tucker, without uttering a single word, fatally shot the man. Remarkably, no legal repercussions followed this incident. In the waning months of 1877, a new chapter unfolded in the career of Deputy Sheriff Dan Tucker. He assumed command of a contingent of 30 armed individuals from Silver City, assembled to intervene in a territorial dispute known as the Salt War in El Paso County, Texas. This group of hired guns was commissioned by Charles Kerber, the county's top law enforcement official and a prominent figure in the so-called Salt Ring. At the heart of this conflict lay the coveted salt deposits, essential for silver ore processing. Mining enterprises, recognizing the strategic importance of these resources, were willing to finance a private militia to safeguard their interests. Tucker's band included some notorious characters, among them the infamous outlaw John Kinney. This mercenary force joined ranks with Texas Rangers and U.S. Army personnel to confront the opposition, dubbed the Anti-Salt Ring. The rival faction, often characterized as a mob, primarily consisted of local Mexican residents who resisted the Salt Ring's monopoly over the salt resources. The conflict reached its zenith in the settlement of San Elizario, where Tucker's unit and their allies engaged in fierce skirmishes. These violent encounters resulted in the loss of life for several individuals suspected of mob affiliation. The intensity of the fighting also prompted a mass exodus, with numerous inhabitants seeking refuge across the international border in Mexico. In the aftermath of the hostilities, Tucker and his cohorts were temporarily stationed in the neighboring town of Isleta. Once the situation stabilized and the need for the mercenary force diminished, the group was dissolved. Having completed this extraordinary assignment, Tucker resumed his regular duties as a deputy sheriff, transitioning back to his standard law enforcement role following his involvement in the Salt War. By 1878, Tucker's notoriety had reached legendary proportions. That year, he fatally shot a fleeing thief, further solidifying his fearsome nickname. In a separate incident, Tucker found himself embroiled in a saloon shootout with 3 suspected horse rustlers, resulting in 2 fatalities and 1 injury. These violent encounters only served to amplify his reputation, instilling both fear and respect throughout the region. During the late 1870s, Dan Tucker's law enforcement career reached new heights as he assumed the pioneering role of Silver City's inaugural town marshal in 1878, while retaining his deputy sheriff duties. His tenure, spanning multiple terms, was marked by a dramatic reduction in local criminal activity. Tucker's approach to maintaining order was characterized by decisive and often violent interventions, which quickly earned him a formidable reputation among the townsfolk. Contemporary accounts, such as those found in the Grant City Herald, shed light on Tucker's confrontational style. A notable incident occurred in November 1878, when Tucker sustained injuries during a heated exchange with Caprio Rodriguez, a disruptive cowboy resisting arrest at a local drinking establishment. Despite his wounds, Tucker emerged victorious, fatally shooting Rodriguez in the ensuing gunfight. In the spring of 1880, Sheriff Whitehill entrusted Tucker with the pursuit of two thieves who had pillaged a prospector's dwelling. After a 2-day manhunt, Tucker returned with the stolen goods and the culprit's possessions, claiming to have eliminated the suspects and delegated their internment to a nearby rancher. Shortly thereafter, Tucker intervened in a severe case of domestic abuse. During this altercation, the assailant momentarily disarmed Tucker, but the lawman swiftly regained control and fatally shot the aggressor. The following year saw Tucker expanding his influence. He assisted Sheriff Whitehill in carrying out a double execution, a duty he had performed several times in Grant County. Tucker also took on the role of marshal in Shakespeare, New Mexico. His tenure there was marked by several high-profile incidents, including the fatal shooting of a known cattle thief, Jake Bond, in September. In November, Tucker apprehended outlaw Sandy King, following an assault on a local merchant. Mere days later, he captured Russian Bill Tattenbaum for livestock theft. Both King and Tattenbaum met their end at the hands of the town's vigilance committee on the very day of their arrest. Later that month, Tucker was dispatched to restore order in the lawless town of Deming, New Mexico. Armed with a formidable shotgun, he patrolled the streets. And according to journalist C.M. Chase, who was covering a story on the Southern Pacific Railroad, Tucker's 3-day crusade resulted in 3 fatalities and 2 injuries among the town's troublemakers, effectively re-establishing peace in the area. James H. Cook, who later managed the W.S. Ranch, noted Tucker's involvement in numerous armed conflicts while serving as a security guard for Wells Fargo. Throughout this period, Tucker's extensive experience and intimidating reputation solidified his position as a central figure in the land of enchantment. The year 1882 marked a pivotal moment in Dan Tucker's career, culminating in a highly contentious incident. On August 24th, the Walcott and Mills Saloon in Grant County became the stage for a series of events that would have far-reaching consequences. James D. Burns, a deputy from the Pasco mining camp, initiated the trouble by entering the establishment and consuming alcohol excessively. As his drunkenness increased, Burns began recklessly displaying his firearm, prompting attempts by Deputy Cornelius A. Mahoney and Marshal Claudius W. Moore to intervene. Burns, invoking his status as a law officer, rebuffed their efforts and continued his drinking binge across multiple saloons. The following day, Burns' intoxicated state persisted. At the Sam Eckstein Saloon, he attempted to provoke Bob Kerr into an altercation, causing Kerr to flee when Burns brandished his weapon. Burns then proceeded to discharge his firearm outside the Centennial Saloon before entering to gamble with Frank Thurmond, a professional card player. Responding to numerous complaints, Marshal Moore confronted Burns, insisting he step outside. Burns defiantly refused, leading to a tense standoff that drew in Tucker and former Deputy John W. Gilmo, who were seated at the same table. This situation escalated rapidly when Burns, momentarily pacified, suddenly drew his weapon after Moore had holstered his. Tucker swiftly intervened, compelling Burns to relinquish his firearm. Following this incident, Marshal Moore departed to procure an arrest warrant, during which time Burns verbally accosted Tucker for his involvement. Upon Moore's return with Deputy Bill McClellan and the arrest warrant, chaos ensued. Burns fired the first shot, missing his target. Tucker responded immediately, wounding Burns in the ribs. In the darkness that followed, as the lamps were extinguished, both Moore and McClellan discharged their weapons, with Moore's shot proving fatal to Burns. Despite the circumstances, public outrage was significant, particularly among the mining community, where Burns was well regarded. Although initially deemed justified, the shooting led to charges against McClellan and Moore due to public pressure. Dan Tucker, initially cleared, was later arrested alongside them. The aftermath saw further tragedy, with McClellan's accidental death while out on bail. Tucker and Moore were eventually acquitted though, and Moore lost his position. The incident tarnished Tucker's reputation, despite those close to him claiming he remained unfazed by public opinion. The political fallout resulted in Sheriff Whitehill's electoral defeat and Tucker's dismissal by the incoming sheriff, though he continued to work with Wells Fargo. Later that year, on December 14th, Tucker faced another life-threatening situation in Deming, New Mexico. Lured to a brothel under false pretenses, he was ambushed by a Mexican assailant and two prostitutes. Despite being shot in the shoulder, Tucker managed to fatally shoot the male attacker and one of the female accomplices. The timely arrival of local citizens, alerted by the gunfire, deterred further violence from another potential attack. In the wake of his recovery from a gunshot wound, Dan Tucker found himself unable to withstand the rigors of stagecoach travel. This led him to transition into a new role as a special officer for the Southern Pacific Railroad. On November 24, 1883, Tucker spearheaded a group in pursuit of criminals who had sabotaged and plundered a train near Deming, New Mexico. The bandits had claimed the lives of the train's engineer and a messenger in the vicinity of Gage Station. Within the same month, Tucker successfully apprehended York Kelly, a notorious outlaw responsible for the deaths of 3 men and the murder of an expectant woman during a bank heist in Bisbee, Arizona. For a brief period, Tucker operated a saloon in Deming. However, by 1885, he had been appointed to the position of Deputy U.S. Marshal for the area. In November of that year, Tucker and his associate, William Graham, found themselves in an armed confrontation with a group of Apache warriors, approximately 11 miles west of Deming. Despite being at a numerical disadvantage, the duo managed to repel their attackers. Tucker resigned from his position in 1888 and relocated to California. His whereabouts became a subject of speculation after 1892, following his known visit to Grant County, New Mexico. From that point forward, he vanished from the sight of all who knew him, and his ultimate fate remained shrouded in mystery. A 1931 newspaper article claimed that Tucker had passed away in a San Bernardino, California hospital, but contemporary research has failed to substantiate this assertion. Although Dan Tucker's name may not resonate widely today, certain historians regard him as one of the Old West's most formidable and underappreciated gunslingers. Some historians contend that Tucker surpassed more renowned lawmen, such as Wild Bill Hickok and Wyatt Earp, in terms of effectiveness and capability. Dangerous Dan Tucker was featured in books that highlighted him as one of the most overlooked and underrated gunmen in Old West history, a legacy that will hopefully last forever.